I was thinking about the end of the family farm in the classic sense, and the end of this paradise that people have in their memories of what life on the land once was. And it the abandoned farmstead represents for, I would think, at least 50% of Saskatchewan people. Hardship and sorrow and loss and the being driven out of paradise.
Today we're talking about the farm crisis. In the cities, we might wonder, what crisis? But families are leaving the land at an astonishing rate. 100 years ago, Saskatchewan was bursting with more than 140,000 farms. Now there's little more than a third of that. Statistics show average farm incomes today are equal to or lower than Depression-era levels. While few of us would say we're in a depression right now, the fact remains that many farms and small towns are facing a very real exodus. What do you think is happening?
There was just an incident. We were in town, and one person came up to us that we didn't even know. He just had heard about the auction, and he said, "So you sold out?" And I was a little taken aback. He meant it as if we were leaving in failure, or we were leaving frustrated, or we were leaving angry with farming, it was. He didn't know the situation, obviously, but sold out. I thought, oh, we've had a tremendous life here. What do you mean? You know, that was the only thing. I was very surprised by that. The term sold out as if we couldn't cut it. Yeah, we gave up and going to do something else. And I was just maybe a little hurt even by that comment, yeah.
It wasn't really that tough a decision to make because of the economics of farming. If we looked at it and it seemed we were doing a lot of work for nothing. All our weekends and evenings were tied up and weren't getting a lot of rewards from it. The work, I didn't mind the work, but it's just, you're not getting paid for it. It's not that much fun anymore. And really that's what it is. The fun is out of farming. Our farm started in approximately 1920 or 21 when my grandfather started the farm. And he was on the farm until 1946 when my dad took over the farm. And that continued until 1972 when myself and my wife took over the farm. After high school, I left the farm for a few years and was working in Ontario, and I met her same place I worked, and got married and came out here. A couple of years after we got married, the family started. That's right. We had 4 kids, raised 3 of them totally on the farm. Our oldest daughter is 26 now, son that's 24, another one that's 20, 14-year-old daughter. I was raised in this house, yes. It holds a lot of memories for us, and there's a lot of history, family history goes along with the house and the yard as well. Over the last 10 years, we've sold off, between my dad and myself, 6.5 quarters of land now. It's been going in bits and pieces over the last 10 years, yes. It's sold. I started working off the farm in 1990, and I guess it was only because farm wasn't paying enough for the bills. Like, farm was just paying for itself, and that's all. You needed extra income for living. I work at a place called Aventus. It's a farm chemical company. My wife works in the city as well. She works at Safeway. She's a cashier at Safeway.
Probably the biggest decision was deciding not to farm and deciding to rent instead. And then from that it just progressed into selling the land and then selling the yard. So it was a natural progression.
I think there's a lot of people that if somebody came to the door to offer to buy the farm, they would sell it. But there's not that many buyers out there. When my kids were at home, even my daughters helped out. Yeah, it helped a lot with the chores and with the combining and all the field work. But when they graduated and went on their own way, that help was gone.
We're both nearing 50, and we just wanted to be out from under, and so this was our decision: either get really, really big and dive into it, or get out. And it seems farming in the middle is it's a little tricky. You don't get ahead, I don't think.
This was a decision to change our lifestyle, is what it was. Yeah.
When it actually happens, yeah, you do think of, well, we had a lot of good years in this house. And there's probably would be a lot more good years to be had if we stayed here. A lot of memories have been created in this house, especially seeing how it's been in the family for 3 generations. But then those memories don't die just because you leave the house. Everybody that has memories from this house still has them. And we're really looking forward to starting in a new house and making some new memories there.
But he had sold the championship.
More than 2 million people came from around the world to settle Canada's west around the turn of the last century. Free land, actually $10 a quarter section, meant for most families a chance at a better life. Of course, it was extremely hard work, subsistence farming in what was relative isolation within a beautiful but harsh nature. Out of adversity came a prairie culture of practicality and endurance. Then the Great Depression hit and the first wave of settlers left the land. When prosperity returned, the struggling homesteader became the grain grower. This romantic stage of prairie agriculture fostered images many of us still think of today: country kitchens, rural community spirit, and childhood innocence. But as technology began to lighten the workload, another exodus began. Now, some say it's a cycle. Subsistence leads to stability, stability to affluence, and then maybe a rejection of what life on the land was. Today, agriculture has a new title: agribusiness, ruled by the global market. It's about management, marketing, and manpower. So where does that leave the historic family farm?
I think farming people as a whole, and particularly small farmers, family farmers, are suffering from a terrible attack, because there's so many variables in farming that it's hard for people to understand which part of the failure, the crisis in farming, is attributable to the weather, which part is attributable to poor management, and my goodness, far too much in my mind is often attributed to poor management when that's not the case at all. And which part is attributed, in fact, to a systematic control and profit-taking elsewhere, which sucks resources out of rural communities in such a way that it's impossible for the people who live there to have enough left to actually continue. And that's what you're seeing in a lot of rural communities. I mean, if you see systematically, you see thousands, millions of bushels of grains going out of these communities. You see thousands of cattle going out of these communities. You see all these young people coming out of these communities. You see all this interest money for loans that you've acquired going out. So you see all these resources and all this money being sucked out of rural communities. And I think that's very mysterious for people to then understand. So what's the crisis from? Where's the crisis lodged? And I think it's quite clearly lodged in a place far away that has enough sucking motion that it can take all these resources, and that's very much the agribusiness corporate sector.
Agriculture generates a lot of money. The sales of agricultural products would be $4 or $5 billion. The only thing is, most of that is paid out in the form of expenses, so that the people who supply the equipment, the other inputs, gasoline, chemicals, all of that kind of input, advice to farmers, accountants who do the farmers' books and so forth, the $4 or $5 billion, most of that gets paid out to them. So the cost of production actually is very close to what the products are sold for, leaving very little net return to particularly grain farmers. So the industry, if you think of it, might look kind of like a pyramid, with the producers being at the base, and then these other components being smaller units on top of that, until you get up to the implement and chemical producers, of which there's only a handful. And that's no longer a competitive industry. That's an oligopolistic or monopolistic market structure where the opportunity to control prices is very substantial. At one point in time, an 800-acre farm, you just grew the wheat and took it to the elevator, and the wheat board took it, and you collected your money, and that was that. It's not like that now at all.
Farming became a business, and I guess you would like to see that it would be able to become a fourth generation, but it wasn't going to happen. There just wasn't enough income there to make it viable for another generation. You would have to still be working off the farm. The other generation would have to work off the farm. And I don't think they were prepared to do that either. If you're living on the farm is important. You have to look after it, and if it means not taking a vacation, or not fixing the house, or not buying a different vehicle when the old one's broken down, those are the sacrifices you make. Yeah. They knew that they weren't going to be able to farm and make a viable living on the farm. You know, it wasn't going to give them the kind of lifestyle that they wanted. That dog must be 14 years old already, I think. Yep. Badger. Yep. And he's still on the farm. Yep. The people that bought the farm said they would keep the dog, and he's doing quite well out there.
I kind of think you think things will not end, and when they do, change is not always easy to take.
For farmers who've managed to stay on the land, a lot of them around here are quite happy to get rid of those homesteads in order to get a little more wheat, you know, or canola, or whatever they're growing. So it doesn't seem to have that sentimental value to them anymore.
Right now, getting land to farm is easy because there's so many people want to quit. 3 years ago it was 3,000 acres. 2 years ago it was 6,800 acres, and last year was basically 10,000. So I'll give you a good example. That's a little over 3 feet wide around the world. There's always going to be people that it bothers to see somebody else grow bigger than what they think you should be. But the fact that I did turn down 6,000 acres last year means that if they wanted more land, all they have to do is put an ad out saying, I want to rent some land. It's the people who are quitting aren't going to wait for somebody big to come along to take them over. They're going to wait for somebody to come along. Like, it doesn't matter whether you've got a half section of land. There's nothing saying that you can't farm a section or stay at the half or farm 10,000 acres. I really don't know if there's a point to how much one person should farm. It comes to how many people want to quit. In 1919, it was owned by the CPR, or deeded to the CPR. And my grandpa bought it from CPR, and it's been in our family ever since. My grandpa died when my dad was 18 years old. My dad has farmed this land until, probably 20 years ago when myself and my brothers would have taken over. Then my brothers farm different land now, and I farm the family farm. We can think our times are tough right now, the way it is. We feel the stress we're putting the money into the acres, but as far as tough times, can you imagine my grandparent when he bought this place and he was out there on the horse or whatever he pulled the plow with? I really can't even answer how he farmed, how he survived that, where he got his heat from for the wintertime. Our water runs through a pipe to our house. Our electricity comes, through the cable in the ground. It's all easy. Everything we do out here is easy. I can farm 10,000 acres easier than what somebody back then could farm a quarter section. I don't know that it would be the same family farm. Everything like that changes. As long as we'd own this home quarter, I'll always consider it the family farm.
We've been married, it'll be 18 years in the fall, and we moved out here as soon as we were married, so approximately 18 years it will be in the fall that we've been farming.
Georgia, my wife, Megan, my daughter, Jared, my son, and Rebecca, my daughter.
When I first started on the farm, I was working full-time. That's from Constantini, right? Mm-hmm. Well, 3 years ago I quit working. So over that course of, say, 15 years, I gradually just became more involved with the farm. And now it's totally what I do. I don't work off the farm, I guess you would say. I don't do anything other than farming and the books. And
the peas are testing 17.4. So a person should probably work on getting those flex headers, like riding better on the ground maybe. And you've got that small doors open on the other side, flopping in the wind. All right. I generally like to make sure everything's being done at the time that it should be, or where it should be done. If you've got a crop that pays, it doesn't hurt to pay somebody else to help you. I've got an excellent crew of people. They've all got farm experience. Actually, every one of my people has come from a farming background, and I don't have to be here for this farm to run. I say what I want to have done, and whether I'm here or not, it will get done. Marketing is probably my favorite part of farming, which I think most people hate it, but that's why I don't grow many board grains. I like to market my own lentils, chickpeas, whatever I can squeeze the most money out of. I spend a lot of time in the wintertime deciding what crops I'm going to grow. I try to, all winter long, that's what I do. And I try to pick my chemicals that I'm using. I just to try to get it basically to the penny. I'm not an early riser, but I will a lot of nights till 11, 12 o'clock at night. But I don't want to make it sound like I work harder than I do. I don't overwork myself. Everyone, we try to take off a certain amount of time. We used to work harder. Now we try to work smarter. If I was 55, 60 years old, I wouldn't be thinking go get big or go broke. I'd think, well, how can I possibly survive until I'm old enough to retire? But well, you either want to have luck and make money, or else you want to be young enough that you can start something else to make a living doing anything,
I can't imagine my kids certainly not my desire for my kids just to start into farming and have us move off and have them farm. Absolutely, they have to have an education, and they need to learn management skills and that sort of thing.
It doesn't matter how much a farmer makes on a particular year. We can be 30% down our last year level of income, or 50 or 100% down from our last year. The cost of grain transportation will go up. The cost of everything along the way goes up. The real bottom line, double or nothing until you can afford to quit. And if you happen to have a bad year, to set you back a long ways, well, it just means you're going to double or nothing a lot more years until you're back to where you want to be.
We had 2 elevators here. They've both closed. Our school population is dwindling. The children don't have as many friends, because people have moved into the city. So there isn't the community activities that there used to be. I mean, there isn't a ball team anymore. There used to be a ball team. The kids used to be able to have figure skating lessons at the rink, hockey teams, that sort of thing. It's the community life that has really suffered from people moving out of the community.
It was a booming town years ago. We have 1 store right now. We're damn lucky to have it. We have a post office and we have a school. Very few towns can say that anymore that are our size. If we don't get our kid population up, that's a hell of a way to say it, but if there's not more kids in our school, eventually we'll lose it.
I think unless you've experienced it, you don't really know what it is to have, the neighbors that care and that will do things for you when you're in time of need. But Moose Jaw isn't that far away, so it hasn't been that hard of an adjustment to take the kids into the community activities within Moose Jaw.
Okay, so production is up all around the world. It's a buyer's market, so there's little return for the investment on the average family farm. Now, some call this the cheap food policy. Let me give you some numbers from the National Farmers Union. They say that at the same time farmers are going broke, corporate agribusiness profits are through the roof. In 1998, Kellogg's, General Mills, and Quaker Oats between them pulled in nearly $2 billion in net profits. Labatt's made $327 million. How about the Royal Bank? A whopping $1.8 billion. At the same time, the average profit for Canadian farmers was less than $2,000. The largest farms are weeding out the small. Some say these giant, super efficient farms are just staving off the inevitable. How big do you have to be to make a buck?
Okay, the global economy is an economy that has evolved as a consequence of virtually all countries in the world greatly reducing the tariffs that they once charged. The federal government in particular has made a concerted effort to wind down the subsidies to farmers and move toward a market-based industry. The thing is, they've run ahead of of Canada's major competitors, the United States and Europe, and as a consequence have placed our farmers in a more difficult situation than American or European farmers find themselves in.
What we've done is completely devalued that which comes from the land, the gifts of the land. We have given it no value. And it's a very small step from there to say, and those who produce that raw product are also without value. They're, in fact, dispensable. We don't need them. And that's the farmers. What they produce is without value. What's really valuable is when the value add has gone on, when it's been further industrialized. And I think we make a big mistake.
In some sense, there are a lot of beneficiaries of this situation. Those who provide the inputs to the agricultural sector are beneficiaries, but in another dimension, so are all of us, you, me, all other consumers, because we're buying food now for a lower fraction of our total income than has ever been the case in the past. Now, your food cost is actually not quite trivial, but getting pretty close to being trivial.
They're completely different bottom lines. Are they completely culturally different? Yes. Agriculture is the enterprise of living on the land and with animals in such a way that they give us food and we take care of it. The project of agribusiness is extracting from the natural resources maximum commodities and profitability. And they're not completely exclusive, because we as farmers have to be profitable too, and agribusiness clearly has to have some sort of relationship with the land in order to extract. But culturally, there are different precepts of how one lives.
The cheap food policy actually is not a policy, it's an outcome of a competitive environment, extremely competitive environment. There's nobody that is responsible, no single entity that is responsible. But those forces don't reside any place that you could name either. The forces are in the atmosphere. There's no place where the price of grain is determined. It's determined by this myriad of all of these transactions between buyers and sellers, and there is no single spot that you could identify as the resident of the absentee power. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's here as much as it is in New York or Chicago or Canton. Quite invisible.
This isn't something that I do for fun. I consider this a business. The family farm to a lot of people is a very important thing. This particular yard has been in our family a long time. I'd like it to stay there. But I don't want to be here if there's no money in it. It's not a hobby.
I'll get it from here. It's your attitude towards what you're doing. And I guess if I felt that we were being, that we were the bottom men on the totem pole and it was all the others who were making the money, I probably wouldn't be in this business. The death of the family farm, as some of us know it, is happening. But the world is changing, and times change, and it's just maybe is a redefinition of what the family farm is becoming. I don't know, I guess we'll see that.
I think it's part of what it is to be human, to crave trees and grass and natural running water and stones and birds that haven't been imported from the tropics. Or, I just think that that's what we need as human beings, and the less of it we have, the more our souls dry up like old shoe leather.
we've been downsizing. We were farming 1,500 acres, but the way farming's been going, we've just decided to downsize before we lost things. And because we don't want to leave the farm, so I'd rather downsize now and keep everything than to lose anything. Our machinery, we don't run big, new, fancy machinery, and it's starting to get tired, and it was getting to the point that we'd almost have to start replacing it. And once again, because there's no money in the farming, we just didn't have the money to do it. And we downsized to 600 acres, and at 600 acres, we can continue with the machinery we've got for a few years.
When we bought that land, we saw a future, and then selling it, it's like you're going in reverse, like we don't have a future. But yet we hold on. We're hoping that someone or something will turn it around, because I don't see a future, a very good future in farming if it doesn't turn around, if something doesn't turn around.
Farmers have always had to deal with nature. That's our biggest risk, was nature. But now we've got to worry about the international markets and everything. We've got no control over that at all, just like these peas. Like the price goes down and we can't control that. Our input costs keep going up. We can't control that. You know, the chemical companies not raise the prices up to where we can just afford to buy them. And if something goes wrong, like with nature or the price of grain from the international market, we can't meet the costs.
We've chosen to produce food for the world, to produce food for people, which is a basic necessity. We're proud of it. What else could I do that would be better than that? To give people the basic necessities. I don't really want to do anything else. But if we continue to lose money, we just might have to, but then we're going to lose everything.
In 1905, my great-grandfather, Archibald MacDonald, came and he homesteaded this quarter here that the house is on. And my grandfather took over this homestead and lived here all his life and raised his family here. And my father lives 1 mile straight across the field. And then we grew up and we left home to look for greener pastures, but we always knew we'd end up back on the farm. So that's what we did. And we moved into this house that my great-grandfather built. That was the first frame house in the district. They built it in 1906. And we lived there for a couple years. And then with money that we'd saved up when we were gone out working, we built ourselves a new house. There's myself, Carol, my wife, and my oldest daughter, Michelle. She's 14, and my youngest daughter, Danielle, she's 9.
About 9 years ago, I guess, was when it was started to get really bad, and when we decided that we had to do something else other than just farm.
I guess I'm one of the lucky ones. I've got another business that's been keeping this farm going. And, you know, so far I haven't been eating up my equity. I've just been stealing some from the other business. But in doing that, I'm not gaining any equity either.
Come on, let's eat. Hurry up.
Yeah.
You're talking farming, family, off-farm jobs. You know, I have bees, which keep me busy. I just got a job this spring, working for crop insurance. There's not enough hours in a day to do everything. There's no time to come home and say, oh, I'm done for the day, because there's always more to do. Always more to do.
It all reflects on, you know, your family life. Well, you know, you're putting too many hours in. You know, the kids don't get the hours that we spent with them that they should have. And so it hurts all the way around.
When you work all year and you get the bills at the end of the year, and then you get your money from your crop and you put them together and find out they're negative, Yeah, there's anger. Well, what did I do it all for? So you just take more money from the jobs, put it back into the farm. The jobs are not extra. They subsidize the farm. They keep us here so that we can subsidize the food that everybody else eats. I like to be able to help other people as much as I can, but I can only help them so much before they're hurting me. And that's the way farming is starting to go right now. We're out here alone and feeling more alone all the time, but yet when you're out there and you do the work and you bring in the crop, you have a very huge sense of pride that you've done something. You're made it.
At one time it was a way of life, but because of the financial strain and everything that's put on you now, that way of life is sort of not there anymore.
We try to talk to people that don't understand farming, try to clue them in on what's really happening out here. Most don't know, and when we tell them, they don't really believe us. We tell them how much it costs to put a crop in the ground. We tell them how much we get at the end, and they ask why we do it. Because right now it doesn't affect them that much, but when we're gone, it really will affect them, and I think they should care about their future, not just ours, theirs.
It's a hard call to know what's the right way to do things. I think the government's got to try to regulate these input costs somehow for us, because we just don't have any say in it at all. International market, as far as pricing the grain goes, boy, unless you can get all the world together, I don't know how you can regulate that.
If I told you about another country where families work for nothing and somebody profits greatly from it, you'd say they're exploited. Well, I feel exploited. And it doesn't feel good. I feel alone. I feel abandoned. It hurts. What's the option, I guess you think of, and the option is to leave your home.
Well, that comes back to that culture thing. For us to pack up and go, it's just like saying you're no longer a French Canadian, or you're no longer an Aboriginal, or you're no longer a Canadian. You know, to a farmer, that's what it is. It's our culture. It's what we are. And you can't just say, leave it behind.
Has the family farm simply had its day? Debt and despair are already a way of life. Critics warn that intensive farming and overuse of chemicals are damaging the land and possibly threatening our health. They say biodiversity is being crushed in pursuit of the dollar. Some farmers have slipped out of the mainstream, fighting back with various types of organic farms or diversification schemes. But will the global demands make local priorities irrelevant? Will we in the city even notice? After all, what do we really have to lose?
If you're going to make the comparison between what's happening to the family farm and what's happened to the elevator, it's a very brutal destruction here going on here. First of all, what you see here is not the inevitable natural event. This is not a tornado taking down an elevator. This is a company, a contractor. These are decisions that have been made by men in boardrooms and in government offices that this is the way it's going to be shaped. And this kind of destruction, and that's what it is, it's destruction, is not development, it's de-development. So anybody who thinks that this is somehow progress will have to re-describe what progress comes to.
But our question is, how do we go forward in a way which isn't just the prescribed trend line that we're currently on? Because I think this trend line is, I know it's very damaging to farmers. I think it threatens our environment. I think it threatens our economic well-being as a country. And there are many, many reasons why we don't want to go forward mindlessly in the way in which we're driving now. So when we're thinking about going forward, when we're thinking about a better time, I'm never thinking nostalgically about a golden time in the past that we should try and artificially replicate. We won't do that, and we can't do that. We are moving into a new time. The question is, how will we see ourselves? How will we organize ourselves in this future? And there are many options there. I mean, the idea that the only option is the way we're going currently is surely a bizarre idea. How could we have hundreds of kinds of soap to choose from and only one kind of future to choose from?
If you put that choice to the population of Saskatchewan, of Canada, of North America, of the Western world, you would have absolutely unequivocal answer to that. The people would vote for the higher living standard rather than a self-contained local economy with a much lower living standard.
I think we'll come quite soon now to a realization that, as a matter of fact, the limits to progress are not technological but ecological. I think we will rue the day that we don't have people in the countryside producing our food. I think the dependence on corporate agriculture is a false dependence that will, in fact, be far more expensive, is clearly environmentally not as sustainable, and culturally devastating.
There are concerns, of course, about the direction that some of the new research is going, the genetically modified crops. There are people who are apprehensive about this, but at the same time there are requirements that safety be demonstrated and so forth. And every new product will have proponents and opponents, and in some cases a mistake will get through and harm people, and the producer will be sued, maybe go out of business, and somebody else will pick it up. That's the nature of the world that we live in today, whether we like it or not. We must like it because we consented to it.
As you drive around the country, you see the old hip roof barns all the time. And there was one that it was a real majestic building, and we drive by it quite a bit. And over the years, the roof started to sag on it. And year by year, it got lower and lower. And I drove by it here this spring, and it collapsed in. And I looked at that, and something came to mind. I started thinking, I said, you know, that's just a perfect example of the family farm. You know, they stood strong and tall and majestic for years. And slowly by slowly, the financial pressure and everything on the family farm, it's caved the roof in.
Scratch an urban person in Saskatchewan. You don't have to go deep to find a farm, you know. That almost everybody who had parents or grandparents here had farms in the family. And they're always remembered as this wonderful place, this paradise. But, you know, there's another, you know, how people tend to only remember the good part. There's another whole story you get from those same people if you hung around long enough about how Mother didn't have a washing machine, how we got hailed out or grasshoppered out or droughted out year after year, and how we, you know, had a struggle to survive, and how hard we had to work, and so on and so forth. And that's underneath that layer of what a paradise it was. But the paradise story lingers, and I think I've tried to figure that out, and I think that it has to do in that period, or the period from settlement up until into the 50s, had to do with living in the beauty of nature and the peace and the solitude and the bird song and the fresh air and the sense of freedom that one has in nature. It's a kind of understanding of nature at a level that is incomprehensible to scientists often, and to many urban people who are generations removed from it, but it is extremely precious. And that's what our birthright is, to have a connection to nature in that way. I'm fortunate in that we have a number of acres, large stretches, which have never been plowed up in the history of humanity, that is, since the glaciers did what they did to form this landscape. And I know from personal experience that on that land there is a presence or presences which are have nothing, which are, I don't know what they are, you know, I just know that they're there. They're the spirit of the land, or a spirit of the land. And so if we go back, say we took a 20-section farm that's all chemical fallow and, you know, the whole bit, there's nothing left that's wild on it, and we moved, say, 4 or 5 different families onto different chunks of it to restore it to its original beauty and its original state, to the extent that you can, because you can't do it perfectly. We don't know how. Would the spirits of the land come back? I don't know. I have no idea. It's a good question. I'd like to know.